Wealth.com. I'm Amanda Sutphin.
The views expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect the views of Money Radio staff, management, or advertisers, and do not represent an offer to buy or sell any securities. Some interviews heard on this program may be sponsored by the participants. It's time for Health Futures with Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth. This is Arizona's only show dedicated to providing you with expert advice on how to live a longer, healthier, and happier life. To learn more, call 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Bob Roth.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and it must be Friday, and indeed it is. It is Friday, February 15th, 2019, and I would be remiss in not giving a huge shout-out to my Papa Bear, Sheldon, a.k.a. Noodles Roth, who's been here on the show before. Today he celebrates 83 years. So Papa Bear, Noodles, happy birthday. May you have many more healthy years left in you. We all that love you and care about you and adore you want you to have those. So I hope it is a special day. So if you're just tuning in, Health Futures is a show about how our older adult population can live a healthier, happier life. And how do I do that? I do that by bringing extraordinary guests here to the show. We have been on the air now. We're in our 6th year. We've done about 260 to 270 shows. If you want to check any of them out, go up to our website at cypresshomecare.com. Across the top, you'll see a media button. Just click on that. And the third button down is radio shows, so you can catch them up there. My family and I, we own a home care agency. We provide care in the home, enabling a lot of our older adult population right here in the Valley for 25 years to be able to age successfully in place. How do we do that? We do that by bringing extraordinary caregivers into the home to do just very that. So our show, as I said, right at the top is about how our older adult population can live a healthier, happier life. And I am just really the facilitator. I get the opportunity to bring extraordinary guests to the show, and today is no different. I get a chance to bring my cardiologist, my good friend, Dr. Nathan Laufer, to the show. Are you there, Nathan? Hello? Nathan, are you on the line?
I am on the line. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you loud and clear. So thank you very much for joining me today, and I appreciate you being on the show. You've been involved in cardiology for a very long time. For our listening audience, I asked him to send me his CV, and I was going to print it out, but I don't know if I had enough paper to print it out on. Nathan's a very modest person, and he is very accomplished and has done a lot, and has done a lot for me. And, you know, if you're okay with it, I'd like to tell a little story. Are you okay?
Go. Absolutely. Go ahead, and happy birthday to your dad while we're at it.
Well, I appreciate it. So I went in to see Dr. Laufer probably about a year and a half ago, and, you know, he's very thorough in the examinations that he does. And, you know, one of the things that we'll talk about here today is, you know, we'll talk about family history and genetics. And, you know, unfortunately, I don't have very good family history. For those that have listened in before, they know that I lost my mother at a very young age. At 48 years old, she had a massive heart attack, was able to live nearly 18 more years, and she passed away at 66 years old. And so I do have some heart disease. And my father, very recently, and I've talked about it here on the show, he has heart disease as well, and just recently had what they call a TAVR, and we'll talk a little bit about that with Dr. Laufer, what TAVRs are, but he had his aortic valve replaced with a Cowles valve. And, you know, for me, having family history has been a big thing for Nathan, and, you know, Nathan's a friend of mine first and then became my cardiologist, and, you know, he has been watching me and observing me for nearly 20 years. And during my my routine visit, because I go to visit him nearly every year, he in his office, I told him I was having trouble sleeping, and I hadn't really slept very well, and probably, I'm going to say, a good 5-6 years, and noticeably more recently, and he indicated, and I want you to talk a little bit about the things that come along with sleep deprivation, but he indicated to me that I should go get a sleep lab, and I not only had one, I had two. I had a home test, and I went into a facility and slept in the facility, and I came out with moderate sleep apnea. And I tried that CPAP thing that many people know, and that thing blows a lot of air in your face, and you feel like you're flying a fighter jet and actually wearing a CPAP. And I come to find out only about 25 to 30% of the population can actually do this or actually follow the doctor's orders, and I was one that just really couldn't do it. And Nathan really stayed on top of me and said, "You got to fix this thing, because if you don't fix it, you're going to go down that same path that your mother went, and you're going to go down that same path that your dad is on right now in terms of heart disease." And then I went and saw an ENT, and my ENT recommended that I get a septoplasty, and I had my tonsils removed, and I also had my uvula, which a lot of people refer to as the punching bag that hangs down from your palate. I had the trifecta done. I had a septoplasty, I had a tonsillectomy, and I had the uvula removed back at the end of December. And for many of our listening audience know that I had a couple guest hosts here at the beginning of the year because I was recovering, and I'm proud to say, and Nathan, I think I've shared this with you, I am sleeping 8 to 9 hours a night. I'm no longer snoring, and I think that's keeping my wife Susie up. Many of our listening audience know Susie. I think she's used to the snoring, so we might have to buy a snoring machine so that she can sleep, but I am getting great sleep, and I really, really thank you, Nathan, because you were the one that pursued that with me. You said, "You got to take care of this thing." And for our listening audience out there, if you are suffering from sleep deprivation, I would encourage you to go see your primary care physician, and he or she may prescribe you to go get a sleep test and get this thing taken care of. So thank you, Nathan. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Glad I could help.
Well, and speaking of that, you see a lot of patients out there, and sleep is one of the things that it's certainly not overrated. And I would imagine I'm not the first patient that you had this discussion with.
Well, sleep is very important. There's been a lot written and a lot of investigation the last few years about why we sleep. But when we don't sleep soundly, and just because you sleep for 6 or 8 hours, it doesn't mean you're getting a restful sleep, especially when you have sleep apnea. Bad things can happen long term. And sleep apnea really, there's two components to it. One is obstructive sleep apnea, which is what you had, where as your muscles in your neck and in your larynx relax, it causes more obstruction to happen, and that's one of the causes of snoring. But not all people who snore have sleep apnea. The second cause of sleep apnea is central, where your brain just doesn't have the trigger to get you to breathe properly. And both of these can be studied during a sleep test, and the treatments are obviously very different. But if we don't have good treatment or the patient can't get the treatment in one form or another, that can lead to high pressures in the lung, which is called pulmonary hypertension. It can lead to heart failure. It can lead to arrhythmias like atrial fibrillation, which is one of the causes of stroke, and it's very difficult to control even high blood pressure and atrial fibrillation in patients who have sleep apnea. And finally, patients are dragging throughout the day, and they can easily fall asleep, sometimes while they're driving. So there are some dangerous aspects to sleep apnea, and there's some very good treatments these days, but patients who are concerned about this do need to have the sleep study done.
It's hard to believe, and I think it's a great way to end our first segment. We're done one. And you know what, Nathan, I've done a lot of talking in this first segment. I'm going to really let you share with our listeners a lot of knowledge about cardiology and heart health. It is February, and that is Heart Health Month, and I've invited our doctor, my doctor, Dr. Nathan Laufer, here to the studio. He's coming into our studio from his offices to share with us some knowledge about how to live a healthier, happier life and have a healthy heart. We are up against a break here. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Are you sick and tired of hearing, "Don't buy an annuity until you've spoken to the so-called experts"? If so, call 800-957-5604, extension 200, to learn the concept of a principal-protected, low-cost, new-generation annuity and the various options. Listen to Secured Financial Solutions every Monday and Thursday at 1 p.m. on this station to prevent a derailed retirement and from purchasing the wrong annuity, especially the high-risk, high-fee variable annuity and complex proprietary index annuities. Secured Financial Solutions will help you understand the difference between true stated guarantees and non-guaranteed returns. Call 800-957-5604, extension 200, and visit dreamretire.com.
Investment advisory services offered through Virtue Capital Management, LLC, VCM, and Registered Investment Advisor. VCM and Secured Financial Solutions, LLC are independent of each other. Annuities are insurance products, backed by the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the insuring insurance company. Information provided is not intended as tax or legal advice and should not be relied on as such. You are encouraged to seek tax or legal advice from an independent professional.
The Renaissance Festival is back! Huzzah!
Weekends now through March 31st.
Great shopping! A giant crafts market!
Welcome to the Renaissance Festival!
New shows! Non-stop feasting! The Renaissance Festival is back!
Weekends now through March 31st. Get great savings with coupons available at participating Cobblestone Auto Spa, Hall of Frames, and Bookman's while supplies last. Don't miss the Renaissance Festival, celebrating 31 years of cheers.
Are you purchasing a home or looking to refinance? Confused about mortgages or the process of getting a mortgage? You're in luck. Joe Capitano, Senior Vice President with Homeowners Financial Group, will bring his 27 years of experience specifically to coach and educate you. Listen every Wednesday at 1 p.m. for his extensive knowledge in terms you will understand. Welcome Joe and the JoeLoans.com Hour. Online at JoeLoans.com. That's JoeLoans.com.
Kronos, helping businesses attract, retain, and engage employees through cloud-based human capital management. Kronos.com. Kronos, workforce innovation that works.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. We're on our second segment. If you're just tuning in, I've got Dr. Nathan Laufer here in the studio, and he is talking about heart health, and I kind of dominated that first segment talking about my own health, and really I wanted our listening audience to know that going to see a doctor is really important, especially if you have family history. And you know, Nathan, I think that's a great segue in terms of talking about genetics. And some of us have not been born into, pristine genetics. But I want you to talk a little bit about family history and why is it important, if you do have a history of heart disease in your family, to not only see your PCP, but probably to go see a cardiologist as well.
Well, family history is something we can't really do very much about. It's very difficult to pick our parents, even though some of us may want to do that. But we certainly can modify the other risk factors. And some of the family history that we think is genetics is actually due to bad behavior in our parents. So the risk factors that are commonly associated with coronary artery disease are high blood pressure, smoking, diabetes, high cholesterol, And now low vitamin D levels as well as a high uric acid level have also been associated. So our parents, who we think may have had a genetic gift to us, may actually have had some of these other risk factors as well, and that's can be difficult to determine. But the one thing that we can do is modify many of the risk factors that I've just listed, so that even if we don't eliminate heart disease completely, if we can delay its onset by 20, 30, or 40 years, I think we've done some good. And there's certainly plenty of data now to suggest that we actually are doing that.
Well, and as far as the data goes, and no matter how you cut it, the top 10 leading causes of death, heart disease has been number one for a very long time. Getting better, but it's still number one, isn't it?
Well, it is, and when we talk about heart disease and death, we're really talking about heart attacks. But there are other kinds of heart disease as well that aren't quite as common. And the way I'd like to start is by describing the heart like you describe a car motor. So you have the fuel line, which is really the coronary arteries, and we have three coronary arteries that supply the fuel to the heart muscle, which is the engine. We also have an electrical system in the heart, which is equivalent to a distributor cap, and that electrical system can sometimes go haywire. It can go either too fast or too slow or stop completely. And the third one is the motor, which is the heart muscle, which can actually get damaged when the fuel line has an obstruction. In other words, we might be running on 4 cylinders instead of 6 cylinders. So that's an analogy that patients seem to understand when it comes to the function of the heart. The most common cause of heart disease is, as I mentioned, coronary artery disease. And the risk factors I mentioned certainly can trigger onset of the atherosclerotic plaque, which is a bulging into the lumen of the artery. Now, there's a common misconception out there about how we treat coronary artery disease. Most patients would like to have their coronary arteries treated because they think we're going to be preventing a heart attack. Well, it turns out that whether you have a 20% narrowing or an 80% narrowing, you have the same risk of having a heart attack, contrary to popular belief. Now, the ones who have an 80% narrowing might have symptoms. They might have some chest pressure, heaviness, or tightness when they're walking. That gets better when they slow down, and that's because when they're walking or exerting themselves, there isn't enough blood to match the increased demand of the heart as it goes faster. And that is the kind of patient who would have an abnormal stress test and who we would do an angiogram on and put in a stent or bypass surgery, and that may relieve the symptoms. That doesn't necessarily prevent a heart attack. And we have seen many cases where the 80% narrowing gets treated, and then the patients come back a few weeks or a few years later with the 20% narrowing that caused the heart attack. So the mechanism of a heart attack is not related to the severity of the plaque. It is related to the blood cholesterol level. The higher the blood cholesterol level, the more fat is in the plaque. And when you have a very fatty plaque, it can act like jello and can easily tear. And that plaque, whether 20% or 80%, when it tears, will cause a clot to form in the artery, which obstructs the blood flow completely and causes death of heart muscle. So the best treatment that has been shown to prevent heart attacks is actually lowering the cholesterol level.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned cholesterol, and I think it's a great segue to really talk about it because, to me, the average person doesn't know the difference between what the numbers are, what an HDL is, and LDL. I know one's good, one's bad. Can you give us just a real abbreviated educational session, if you would, an executive summary on what we should be looking for in terms of what cholesterol numbers and what do they actually mean?
Well, that's a very good question, and there is a lot of confusion out there. As cardiologists, we rarely look at the total cholesterol anymore. We look at the good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol. Now, the good cholesterol is the HDL cholesterol, or high-density lipoprotein, and that is the molecule that takes cholesterol from the plaque and brings it to the liver to degenerate it or degrade it. The LDL cholesterol is the bad cholesterol, and that's the low-density lipoprotein. That is what takes cholesterol from the liver where it's manufactured and deposits it into the plaque and can cause plaque to grow. So most treatment that we are looking for now is aimed at lowering the LDL or the bad cholesterol. The general population, about half of the population has high cholesterol. It's really an epidemic in Western society because of all the lovely food that we're eating. So the way the guidelines that we have to lower LDL cholesterol is that if you have no coronary artery disease, but you do have some risk factors, as I outlined, then the goal LDL cholesterol should be less than 100. If you have coronary artery disease or if you have diabetes, then the goal LDL cholesterol should be less than 70. And it's very difficult. We always get into discussions with patients about how to lower cholesterol, and patients for some reason do not like these statin drugs. They've gotten a lot of bad press, but they are miracle drugs that do lower cholesterol. And if you have an LDL cholesterol of 130 or 140, it's very difficult to get it down more than 15% from the baseline without the help of some medication. So, and that these statin drugs have clearly been shown to prevent heart attacks and strokes and have patients live longer. There were hundreds of thousands of patients in these studies, and there is no question that it does help. Most cardiologists actually would like to see this in the drinking water.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm one that you prescribed a low-level statin to keep my numbers down. My LDLs were somewhere between 124 and 136, and I remember you telling me that 99 was a number that we wanted to get to or below that. And I also remember you telling me that all of us are born with LDLs at 50, right? Is that correct? Do I remember that correctly?
That's right. All humans are born with LDLs of 50, and all mammals have LDLs of 50. So why should we even be accepting an LDL of 100 as being normal? But the way to look at it is you can never be too rich, too thin, or have a cholesterol too low. And ideally, if we can lower cholesterol from even 100 down to 50, there is added benefit in preventing heart disease. But getting to 50 is very difficult unless we use these new injectable drugs, which are also miracle drugs.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, I think our message to our listening audience is really know your numbers. Know your cholesterol numbers. And, you know, we're not really worried, according to Dr. Laufer here, we're not really worried about the total cholesterol. We really want to understand where your LDLs are, those bad cholesterol numbers. And definitely, know your numbers. And if their numbers are high on the LDL side, you should be visiting a cardiologist. You know, I want to...
There's one other...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry, there's one other issue about LDL cholesterol. We are now subfractionating the bad cholesterol, and the patients who are at highest risk are the ones who have what we call dense LDL particles. So, and that has to do with particle size and the density of the particle. And those patients are at extremely high risk of having heart disease, and those patients really need aggressive treatment.
And there's a specific blood test that you take for that, right? It's not your normal blood test.
That's right. It's called an NMR cholesterol test, and most laboratories can now do it and can subfractionate the LDL particles, and that actually gives us added benefit, especially when patients are at goal but have a really strong family history. It just adds to the information, and we might actually want to be more aggressive with drugs in these patients.
There's nothing like being proactive for all the things that we talked about, smoking, diabetes, family history, know your numbers, and certainly, consult with your cardiologist in terms of how do you get those numbers lower. Nathan, it's hard to believe we're coming up at halftime. So I told you it flies by. I do want to talk about in the second segment, I do want to talk about the women, because often people think heart disease is a man's disease. I want to talk about women and their hearts. I also want to talk about the innovations that are out there and the new techniques and procedures that you as cardiologists have at your disposal for your patients that have heart disease. I think it's fascinating that my father had a valve replaced.
We pause for a look at the world's news. Then we're back with Money Talk. We're Money Radio 1510 AM and 105.3 FM.
Special report, Trump declares emergency. Moments after the president today declared a national emergency on the southern border, he also said he expects court challenges.
We will have a national emergency, and we will then be sued, and they will sue us in the Ninth Circuit, even though it shouldn't be there. and we will possibly get a bad ruling, and then we'll get another bad ruling, and then we'll end up in the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a fair shake.
The president says the declaration will free up several $billion for the wall to be taken from other government budgets. Trump says building the wall is vital to national security.
And when you listen to politicians, in particular certain Democrats, they say it all comes through the port of entry. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's just a lie. It's all a lie. They say walls don't work. Walls work 100%.
Democrats say the move violates the funding power of Congress laid out in the Constitution. I'm Mike Moss.
Indeed knows it's hard to find qualified candidates when you're hiring.
It's like finding a unicorn.
But when you post your job on Indeed, it's easy to find people with the skills you need.
Nurse practitioner, 4+ years experience, acute care certification.
Indeed has a huge pool of amazing candidates and screener tools that help you find your most qualified applicants.
Whoa, an entire short list of unicorns.
Now, get a $50 credit to give your first job posting premium placement at Indeed.com/credit. Terms, conditions, quality standards, and usage limits apply. Additional terms online.
New appliances can do wonders for a kitchen. Right now at the Home Depot, they'll also do wonders for a kitchen budget with up to 30% off appliance special buys, like the 4-piece stainless steel Samsung kitchen suite, over $2,000 off a fridge, gas range, microwave, dishwasher, all at once, just in time for dinner. Up to 30% off appliance special buys now at the Home Depot. More saving, more doing. U.S. only while supplies last. See store for details. Electric range available at extra cost. Valid through February 27th.
If you're still working, you're still making money. But what about retirement? Make sure you have reliable income then, too. Keep listening to your Money Radio experts to find out how.
I remember the days I used to worry about my investments.
The Dow tumbled 200 points today.
Oh no, better sell. I used to panic.
Investors should brace for a scary ride.
Brace myself? I had white-knuckled fear of working till I was 97, but not anymore. I found a financial advisor with a long-term plan that works. Feels good.
Fleming Financial Services, a fee-based advisor who does what's best for you, not for the commission. With over 21 years in business, Fleming Financial Services has seen and helped clients through all kinds of market conditions. Have a long-term plan and work with someone that can help you alleviate the stress. Fleming Financial Services, your worry-free advisor. 480-632-8770. That's 480-632-8770. FlemingFinancialServices.com. Fleming Financial Services Inc. is a registered investment advisor offering advisory services in the state of Arizona and in other jurisdictions where exempted. Registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training.
The Renaissance Festival is back!
Huzzah! Weekends now through March 31st.
Hubba, hubba, huzzah! Great shopping, a giant crafts market. Your favorite shows.
Be ready to have a great time and don't be afraid to participate.
Huzzah! Just night.
Huzzah!
Silly fun for the entire family.
Happiness reigns at the Renaissance Festival.
Huzzah! Lots of new shows. Non-stop feasting. Leave your cares behind. It's fun and affordable.
You will adore the Renaissance Festival.
The Renaissance Festival is back.
Huzzah! Weekends now through March 31st.
Discount tickets available at Fry's and Fry's Marketplace or online at RenFestInfo.com. Presented by Delta Airlines, Fry's, Pepsi, Budweiser, and Guinness.
The Renaissance Festival is open on President's Day Monday. Save $28 with 2 for $28 coupons available at Cobblestone Auto Spa, Hall of Frames, and Bookman's while supplies last.
Hurry into your Burlington store and stock up on the everyday essentials you need, like socks, underwear, denim, coats, plus towels, bedding, and so much more. Burlington, style for everyone.
I'm Jim Chesko with Your Money Now. It's generally a positive day for the stock market, but shares of FedEx and United Parcel Service are losing ground after fellow transportation company XPO Logistics said its largest customer is curtailing about 2/3 of its postal injection business. Some analysts say that customer is very likely Amazon, which has already signaled plans to reduce third-party transportation exposure. FedEx shares are down 3%, UPS down 1.6%, and XPO is tumbling tumbling 14.5%. The Wall Street indexes, the Dow Industrials up 365 points. The Nasdaq has gained 29. The S&P is up 22. We learned over the last several months that live-action feature films about Hot Wheels and Barbie are in the works, and now there's another Mattel toy brand going Hollywood. The company announced today that it's partnering with MGM and Picture Start to bring its iconic American Girl dolls to the big screen. The announcement comes at a time in which American Girl dolls are experiencing sluggish sales as young kids gravitate toward video games and electronics. That's your money now.
Prices are for base buildings only, do not include windows, doors, or accessories. Attention all business owners who rent or lease space, including storage space. Stop wasting your money paying someone else for your space. You can now save a ton of money and own your own building with the incredible sale prices from General Steel. That's right, now you can save as much as half the time and cost of conventional construction and stop renting space from others. Just call 866-95-STEEL to see how General Steel can help you save money. Our 50-year structural warranted buildings are custom designed for your needs. You can get a 40 by 60-foot building for less than $25,000 or a 50 by 100 clear span building for under $40,000. There's no wasted space and construction takes half the time. Call 866-95-STEEL. With strong construction spending and high demand, this special pricing will not last long. Call 866-95-STEEL and get your options and pricing package on dozens of building options. Call 866-95-STEEL and see how General Steel can save you money. Call 866-95-STEEL. That's 866-957-8335. 866-95-STEEL.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and we're on our second half. And if you're just tuning in, I've got Dr. Nathan Laufer here with me today talking about heart health. As many of you know, February is Heart Health Month. Yesterday we celebrated Valentine's Day, so people are thinking about their hearts, and we want them to think about their hearts. Number one killer in our country and probably the world is still heart disease, so we want to make sure that people are watching and observing and making sure that they are living a healthier, happier life by having a healthy heart. I closed off the first half, and I do apologize. We did have a little confusion here, and I was teeing up our second half. So really what I want to talk to Dr. Laufer on is I want to talk to him about women's health, specifically hearts, and I want to talk about the innovations that have been created I would say even as of now, some of the innovations that are being created today. And I want him to really give us a insight, a look inside in terms of what is happening in the cardiac field as it relates to innovation and technologies. But I want to start first, Nathan, I want to talk to you about women and hearts, because so many people think that, the number one killer of women is breast cancer, and that's so far from the truth. It's hearts, and they get heart attacks just like men do, and I think there's that stereotype that some of the signs and symptoms are, the clutching of the chest, and many people think that men get it more frequently than women, and I think it's an equal opportunity offender, is it not?
Absolutely. Women are more tend to have heart disease and die from heart attacks by 6 times as many as they would from breast cancer, and yet women are obviously concerned about breast cancer. The thing that we've discovered after many years of studies is that women are different, and their hearts are different as well. It turns out they do not have as many coronary arteries per gram of muscle as men do. They have smaller arteries. Their narrowings are a little more diffuse, and their symptoms are different. They may just have symptoms of sweating or nausea, and they may not have the classic chest tightness. So they will often see their gynecologist, and the first thing everybody thinks about is they're going through menopause, where it could actually be heart disease. Sometimes it's a headache, sometimes some back pain. So the symptoms are very unusual, and one of the focuses of the American Heart Association and the Red Dress program was to get increased awareness towards women as far as heart disease is concerned, and it seems like this program is working. The other thing that's interesting about women is that if we do stents or bypass surgery, they actually don't do as well. The arteries are smaller, they're a little more difficult to sew into, the mortality rates are a little bit higher. So the best thing we can do for women as for men is prevention, because treatments are not as ideal as they are in men.
And risk factors are still the same. Diabetes, smoking, inactivity. There's so many, they're the same for men as they are for women, are they not?
That's true, and women actually have a lower incidence of heart disease until they hit menopause, and then they actually bypass men. So it was thought that if we could give women hormonal therapy, that maybe we'd prevent heart disease from happening. As it turns out, that's not the case, and it actually worsens the chance of having heart disease when we start giving women estrogens. And so now the recommendations are as little as possible for as short as possible, just to take care of postmenopausal symptoms, but not with the thought that we'd be preventing heart disease in women.
No, that's good to know, and certainly you talk about knowing the numbers. And we talk about, oftentimes we talk about exercise and we talk about weight. BMI is something that I think, I would think that cardiologists as well as primary care physicians are very, very on top of. Would you certainly agree on that?
The heart healthy look is actually the lean marathon runner type of look, the kind that mothers feel that their kids aren't getting enough nourishment, but that's actually a heart healthy look. Again, the lower the better, as long as you're not wasting away and are not skin and bones. But the less fat on you, the better, and the BMI is a good, accurate determinant of that. But women, obviously, we want to keep them around as long as possible. But just to underscore, even though heart disease is still the number one killer, the chance of having a heart attack today as opposed to 10 or 15 years ago, it has dropped by 25%. So something that we're doing seems to be working across the nation.
Well, certainly it's radio shows like this and making people aware, and
obviously,
exactly, and that's why I wanted to have you on the show, is really talk about this whole awareness thing, and we covered family history. We certainly talked about testing, certainly LDLs and HDLs and cholesterol. Are there any other tests that you would order for a patient to go through to kind of get a baseline on where they're at?
Well, some of it depends on symptoms. A common symptom is shortness of breath, and that could really be anything from poor physical conditioning to bad lungs to a weak heart muscle. But shortness of breath is usually an indication for getting an ultrasound to make sure that the cardiac function works well and the heart valves are working well. And chest pain, we see a lot of chest pain, and a lot of chest pain is non-cardiac pain, especially in women. So there is an entity called mitral valve prolapse, for example, which is present in 15% of otherwise healthy women. But it can give you this funny kind of chest pain. It can give you palpitations, but it's really not dangerous at all. And it just means that the mitral valve, which is a valve allowing blood into the major pumping chamber, tends to parachute backwards a little bit. But that's not a dangerous situation at all, but it just can be a nuisance. So in that case, we can diagnose these things by an echocardiogram or an ultrasound of the heart. And with chest pain, we can do a stress test. We also have been doing these CT scans looking at a calcium score. That will tell us whether there's some early coronary artery disease. And if we do see a high calcium score, it tells us to be even more aggressive at lowering cholesterol to stop any plaque from progressing.
I've heard about that whole calcium measurement. So is that relatively new, or is that something they're doing now that they've never done before?
No, it's been around for at least 10 or 15 years. The problem is that it's not very specific. So it will tell you if there's a little bit of calcium in your artery, but it won't tell you if it's in the lumen of the artery or in the wall of the blood vessel. And so if we do see calcium, it tells us that there is some atherosclerosis present, but then we would do a stress test which would give us the physiology and tell us whether there is a severe coronary narrowing or whether it's just mild and in the wall of the artery. But with both of those scenarios, patients will again need aggressive treatment to lower not only their cholesterol but also their blood pressure.
Well, I'll tell you what, you are full of great information here, and certainly awareness is part of the way that we can tackle this and get ahead of it. Like you said, 25%, we're doing better. we could do even more. We are down 3 segments. We got one more to go. Stick around. I got Dr. Laufer here. Be right back.
Are you sick and tired of hearing, don't buy an annuity until you've spoken to the so-called experts? If so, call 800-957-5604, extension 200, to learn the concept of a principal-protected, low-cost, new generation annuity and the various options. Listen to Secured Financial Solutions every Monday and Thursday at 1 p.m. on this station to prevent a derailed retirement and from purchasing the wrong annuity, especially the high-risk, high-fee variable annuity and complex proprietary index annuities. Secured Financial Solutions will help you understand the difference between true stated guarantees and non-guaranteed returns. Call 800-957-5604, extension 200, and visit dreamretire.com.
Investment advisory services offered through Virtue Capital Management, LLC, VCM, and Registered Investment Advisor. VCM and Secured Financial Solutions, LLC are independent of each other. Annuities are insurance products, backed by the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the insuring insurance company. Information provided is not intended as tax or legal advice and should not be relied on as such. You are encouraged to seek tax or legal advice from an independent professional.
Save the date for American Cancer Society's 58th Annual Evening of Hope Gala. One of Arizona's longest-running premier fundraising events takes place on February 16, 2019 at Chateau Lux in North Phoenix off the 101 freeway. The festivities will begin at 6 p.m. with a silent auction, followed by dinner and a live auction featuring many unique items. This festive charitable event will continue late into the evening with live music, dancing, entertainment, and more. More than 500 attendees, including business and philanthropic leaders, corporate sponsors, and guests, are expected to come together and help save lives from cancer. All proceeds from the 58th Annual Evening of Hope Gala go towards fulfilling the mission of the American Cancer Society. This means funding research and quality of life programs, educating the public on cancer, and promoting advocacy and service. Join us for a one-of-a-kind evening on Saturday, February 16th. For more information, visit acsphoenix.org/ACS Evening of Hope AZ.
Hurry into your Burlington store and stock up on the everyday essentials you need, like socks, underwear, denim, coats, plus towels, bedding, and so much more. Burlington, style for everyone.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. And if you're just tuning in, we're on our 4th segment, and we are talking about hearts. It is Heart Health Month, and I've got Dr. Nathan Laufer here on the line, and he is representing the cardiology field and really talking about prevention, awareness, and I really want to draw our attention here in our 4th segment to really talk about innovations, and I want to really talk about what is breakthrough, what are some of the things that are going on. Nathan, I talked about at the top of the segment, my father having a TAVR. I didn't even know what a TAVR was. The fact that they went through his carotid artery and kicked out his old aortic valve and put a Cal's valve in. And it was crazy because within hours, he felt better. He could breathe and he had stamina. It's stuff like that is happening all around us. So would you help our listening audience and me understand some of the great things that are happening in the cardiology field?
Yeah, it's a great time to be in cardiology. Let's start with TAVR, for example, which is a transapical or transfemoral aortic valve replacement. We have had many patients over the years who have a narrowing of their aortic valve. Now, the aortic valve is the valve that opens to allow blood to be pumped from the major pumping chamber to the rest of the body. As people get older, that valve will sometimes calcify and get narrowed. And when it gets to a certain level, they need to be fixed, or else these patients can develop symptoms of heart failure, dizziness or passing out or chest pain. And when symptoms develop, the average life expectancy is anywhere from 2 to 5 years if nothing is done.
Wow.
Traditionally, we have sent those patients for open heart surgery to have a valve replacement. However, a lot of these patients are over 80 years old, and surgery and open heart surgery in that age group can be fairly risky. So this new procedure was developed about 10 years ago, and actually was pioneered in Canada, in Vancouver.
And Canada, you happen to know a little bit about that country, right?
I happen to be from Canada, so I'm kind of proud of that.
And McGill trained, too.
McGill trained, thank you.
There you go.
So this TAVR procedure involves a fancy kind of angioplasty of the aortic valve. So what is done is there is a large stent that is mounted on a deflated balloon. Inside that stent is a bioprosthetic or a pig or a cow valve, and that all is compressed on this deflated balloon. It is then advanced, usually from the groin, up across the aortic valve, and it's inflated across the valve, compressing the old valve and putting basically a new valve inside the old valve. So the stent that has the valve on it is inflated, the balloon is then withdrawn, and what is left is a new valve that functions extremely well. This procedure is gaining a lot of traction. It was initially approved by the FDA for only high-risk surgical patients. Now it's approved for moderate-risk patients. In Europe, it is done in all patients. And so I think where we're heading is the elimination of another open-heart procedure with this type of technology.
Yeah, so for Dad, had he had it done 5 to 10 years ago, he would have been cracked open, and they would have replaced the valve that way.
Correct, with
Amazing.
a higher risk of surgery and a higher mortality rate.
And they couldn't do it through the femoral artery for my dad because he had arteriosclerosis. He had some crystallization of that artery, and they didn't think that the balloon and the Cal's valve could fit through there. So, I mean, to me, I was totally blown away. I did not know they were going to do it through the carotid, and that was just
Well, you can
fascinating.
do it through the subclavian, through the carotid. There are lots of avenues to get into the main highway. So as long as you get through there, there's actually another technique called the transapical approach, where a surgeon will make a tiny incision on the side of the chest and expose the tip of the heart, which is not really considered open heart surgery. And through that, the valve can actually be placed, and then everything's sewn back together. So it's just a mini operation as opposed to the major open heart surgery.
I love the metaphors to the automobile and highways. The one that you talked about in the first segment, talking about coronary heart disease and equating it to the engine of an automobile, and now you talk about the pathways that blood flows as highways, which is fascinating. And for me, my Papa Bear he's taken 2 blood thinners right now. He's taken Plavix and he's taken Eliquis, and certainly there's lots of complications that come along with being on 2 blood thinners, and they're talking about doing the Watchman procedure, and I find that so fascinating. And if you wouldn't mind, explain to our listening audience what a Watchman procedure is.
Yeah, this is a fairly new procedure. It's been around maybe 4 or 5 years, and patients who have atrial fibrillation are more likely to get strokes. Now, atrial fibrillation is the quivering of the top chamber of the heart. The bottom chamber contracts normally, but the top chamber quivers and does not contract. It fibrillates. And so when that happens, blood sits and can form clots, which can then fly out and cause strokes or fly to anywhere in the body. So traditionally, we have put those patients on blood thinners to prevent these clots from forming and to prevent strokes from happening. And it works very well in many patients. We actually have newer types of blood thinners like the Eliquis that you mentioned, or Pradaxa, or Xarelto, or the 3 that are out there where you don't need to have blood tests every week or every month. But there are patients who are at high risk for bleeding with these blood thinners. Anybody who's had any kind of brain surgery, who's had trauma, who's unsteady on their feet and could fall, or who's had bleeds in their gut, these are patients who we've always had to balance the risk of a stroke with the risk of bleeding. So the Watchman procedure has come out, and it turns out that most of the clots come from the left atrium and from a little appendix within the left atrium, which looks a little bit like a fish bone or a chicken bone. And it's about 2 centimeters in 2 centimeters in opening. And the physician would go up from the groin, put a catheter into that area, and open it up. And there's a covered mesh on the side that's exposed to blood. And what it does, it obliterates that appendix and stops blood from getting into there and forming a clot. And it turns out that when we put this little device in there, we have the same risk of having a stroke as patients who are on blood thinners. So for patients who are high risk for being on blood thinners, this is an excellent alternative, and it's a fairly quick and easy procedure to perform. And I think our oldest patient has been about 95 years of age. So we don't necessarily have to treat the atrial fibrillation. As long as we have a watchman in there, these patients will have a decreased chance of having a stroke.
Amazing. And some of our listening audience know this. I have a daughter who's down at U of A. She is getting her Bachelor of Science in Nursing, and she just finished up yesterday her last round. She spent about 6 weeks working on the telemetry observation floor at TMC, Tucson Medical Center, and having her grandfather having had a TAVR and considering watchmen, she was just amazed how many patients were there having those types of procedures, and it's just so new. And we're constantly breaking with innovations and new technological advances in cardiology. And Nathan, it's like you said, it's a good time to be in that field right now because we're saving lives.
Yes, we are. We have other techniques as well now for patients who have heart failure. We had been asking them to weigh themselves. The weight goes up, to take extra water pills, but by the time the weight goes up, sometimes the horse is out of the barn, so to speak, and they end up in the hospital gurgling with shortness of breath and heart failure. So there's a new device called a CardioMEMS device that we can put in to a branch of the pulmonary artery, which is the artery coming out of the right side of the heart, which can measure the pressure of the main pumping chamber. And patients will then lie on a pillow for about 15 seconds. They get recordings for the previous 24 hours, and that gets transmitted to our office. And we can adjust water pills from the office and keep people out of the hospital. Wow. And that's been a real major advance, and that's been around for about a year.
So we are coming up on the end of our show. It's hard to believe, Nathan, the time really flies by. And Dr. Nathan Laufer is with a firm called Heart and Vascular Center of Arizona. If you do want to reach him or his practice, you can call them at 602-307-0070. And Nathan, do you have any last comments, last thoughts you would like to leave our listening audience here on Heart Healthy Month, February 2019?
Well, just that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So we have all kinds of fancy techniques, but it's a lot easier to not have to need any of these things and just take care of your heart.
Take care of your heart and live a healthy life. A well-balanced diet, get some sleep like we talked about at the beginning of the show, as well as don't smoke or drink. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. Thank you for being here. We'll be back next Friday. Thank you, Dr. Laufer. Bye-bye.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to Bob Roth's Health Futures. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call Cypress HomeCare Solutions at 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Or visit CypressHomeCare.com. Be sure to join Health Futures with Bob Roth every Friday at noon, right here on Money Radio 1510 and 105.3 FM.
Hi, this is Ken Morgan.
Hey, this is Mark Asher.
It's going to be a long weekend because Monday is President's Day. A lot of you will be just relaxing, and we won't be here either for Business for Breakfast, but back on Tuesday with a life coach.
A life coach. Going to teach us about life.
Yeah.
We're also going to talk about hard money lending and what that's all about in the real estate world. Noah Brocious is going to tell us about that. And we'll take a look at the markets and a whole lot more. We'll see you Tuesday, 7 a.m., Business for Breakfast.
Financial words of wisdom with Market Wrap host Mo Ansari.
Staying out of the market is the most dangerous thing you can do for your financial future.
If you continue to spend like a drunken sailor, you're going to run out of money. That's the reality. This is not poker. This is your financial future.
It's helpful financial food for thought on your drive home with a host who tells it like it is. Market Wrap with Mo Ansari.
Catch Market Wrap on Money Radio 1510 and 105.3 Monday through Friday at 5 p.m.
The station that talks about your money. Money Radio 1510 and 105.3 FM is